Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume. It is the week of May 19th, and this is your Monday briefing. It's going to be a tight week here in Washington before Congress takes next week off for Memorial Day. And at the top of the priority list, the 2025 reconciliation bill, which stalled for a few days in the House Budget Committee. So today we're going to focus on some potential tax pitfalls in getting President Trump's one big beautiful bill passed by the House, the SALT cap and IRA clean energy credits. And joining me to talk about this is Scott McCandless. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Sindhu. Nice to be with you. Thank you.
Good to be with you. It's been a while. You've had a very busy travel schedule. And I know you're headed to the airport, so let's get right into this. So let's start with the SALT cap. Over the weekend, after some negotiation, the package made it out of the Budget Committee and was sent to the Rules Committee. What changes to the SALT cap are under consideration, and what revenue issues do these foreshadow? And if you wouldn't mind just talking about what exactly happens in the Rules Committee.
Sure, great question. And maybe I'll start with process and then move to the substance. On process, the Budget Committee really only had one job, which was to take all of the various committee products, including the Ways and Means Committee's tax bill, and bring them together. It's almost a stapling and paper management job, right? So that's what the Budget Committee had to do. Not to diminish the importance of that vote over the weekend, they finally got it through the Budget Committee, which tees up the next stage in the process, and that's bringing it to the floor. The way you get to the floor is through the Rules Committee, which sets not only the substantive issues that will be debated, but also the parameters of debate, floor time, amount of debate, whether amendments can be offered, those kinds of things, the way in which it will be handled on the floor. But the Rules Committee is also the last stop where you can make substantive changes to the bill. And that's why there's so much focus on what will happen in rules over the course of the next few days, because there are still some undetermined issues with this bill. You mentioned several at the top. We'll start with the state and local tax deduction. It was capped at $10,000, as we all know, by the Inflation Reduction Act. And there are many members in the Republican caucus who would like to increase that. The key issue here is not necessarily the SALT cap, but another issues game, and that's the number 3. Republicans can only lose 3 votes in the House, or else this bill won't go anywhere. And there are more than 3 Republicans in the caucus who care about increasing that SALT cap beyond its current $10,000 limit. Therefore, they feel that they have some leverage, and they have been wielding it. The negotiations last week resulted in an increase from $10,000 to a $30,000 cap, although even at $30,000, it was scheduled to phase out based on income levels above $400,000. And now there are further negotiations to try to increase it from $30,000. We do not know where it will land. We've heard issues all over the map, perhaps going to $40,000 for individual filers and doubling it to $80,000 for joint filers. I'm not sure they can reach numbers quite that high, but that's what's in the mix. And we'll have a furious amount of conversation about that over the next few days as they try to get this bill on the floor later this week. From a revenue ramification standpoint, which you also asked about, this is a big deal. It can get very expensive to increase that SALT cap. The demographic impact is also a bit of a challenge because it tends to skew towards the higher income individuals who tend to benefit the most from this. So you can have a bit of a revenue distribution table issue with regard to it. And further down the road, if we do try to project over the horizon to a time when the Senate is considering this, the Senate is less enthusiastic about increasing the SALT cap. So we have a variety of substantive as well as political challenges still ahead on that issue.
So with respect to the clean energy credits, what changes to these credits does the bill propose? And is there different treatment of consumers versus businesses? So what's still available?
Outstanding question and distinction in your question, because it almost seems as if there is a line between those credits that fall for the consumers versus those that fall for business. In that first bucket of consumers, they're almost wiped out, especially in the electric vehicle space. And it doesn't really matter if it's for new or used electric vehicles, commercial vehicles, residential refueling property, you name it, they all got the axe pretty hard. However, on the business side, there are some that still remain. In fact, most of them still remain. Rather, it's a question of phase outs. Most of the phase outs were accelerated. In one unusual case, there was a phase out that would have been earlier that was extended so that they all line up with essentially a 2031 phase out date. But they are all on the chopping block. This, like the SALT cap that we talked about just a moment ago, is also the subject of intense debate and could change radically between what we are describing now and what might actually appear on the floor later this week. That's because there is wide difference of opinion among Republicans. And again, they can only lose 3 votes. Some want to go further and accelerate the phase-out dates, maybe rip them out completely, root and branch. There are others who want to be a little more judicious with the IRA credits and not rip them out, maybe even give them longer lifespan for the phase-outs. And that debate is still unsettled and will continue over the next few days.
So do you see this tax bill giving a meaningful boost to the economy?
Yeah, yes and no, or maybe it's a yes, but answer. Yes, to the extent that if it follows through in the tax bill as currently drafted with a resuscitation of the TCJA orphans, as we call them, especially bonus depreciation going back to 100%, but also the interest deduction limitation and the research expense issue going back to more generous levels, even if those are temporary, as the current House bill projects 5 years, those would be quite influential on the economy. However, there's a new provision in here that is getting, frankly, only a little attention and perhaps deserves more. And that is to not only provide bonus depreciation and expensing for material items, but also for facilities. Now, this is a $150 billion proposition, the most expensive business item in the entire bill. And essentially takes what would otherwise be 39.5-year depreciation property and allows you to expense it in the current year, a pretty robust and dramatic change in the treatment of these kinds of properties. And that could be very influential. The time horizon there might constrain the ability of taxpayers to use it because you have essentially a 4-year begin construction window followed by a little bit longer period, 4 years for placed in service. Maybe that would be constraining. And on the production side, that's mainly limited to agricultural and chemical. However, the manufacturing side seems to be unlimited. So it could be quite a robust provision going forward. And that might be the one that really sparks the economy. However, as I said at the beginning, the answer is yes, but. And I think it's very important to manage expectations about this bill, even if they manage to get it done. And we still project that eventually they will, even though it will be very difficult to do so. It's not quite what we saw in 2017. In 2017, we had a rate cut from 35 to 21. We had a shift in the international system from worldwide to territorial. Pretty dramatic changes. We don't quite have that level of dramatic differences between what we currently have versus what's on the other side of this bill. But there are still several provisions in there that could be robust adrenaline shots to the economy.
So, Scott, where else could we see further changes when it comes to the Senate version of the bill?
Yeah, the Senate is a really open question. Remember, they're working from a current policy baseline, so they might be a little more aggressive about leaning into permanence on those business provisions, such as the TCJA orphans that I mentioned earlier, research expense, bonus depreciation, interest deduction limitation. Maybe they want to make those permanent. Again, I don't want to get over our skis and overpromise and mismanage expectations for our viewers, but it's possible they may lean strongly into that. That's something that Chairman Crapo has mentioned in the past and is at least under potential consideration. But that also changes some of the scoring dynamic, even under their current policy baseline. Like I said earlier, they're less interested in increasing the state and local tax deduction cap. They may have differences of opinion with regard to some of the savings that the House is deriving, especially on the Medicare side. And the work requirements there. So there are a whole variety of issues here. We've been warned that the Senate has a red pen, meaning that they want to make some significant edits to the House version, and that they will wield it with some vigor, we expect. So watch for the Senate process, which could start in June, to be quite dramatically different from what we're experiencing now. Ultimately, that is not unexpected. Really, I think the fight, as hard as it is now and as difficult as it's going to be to get this passed in the short term, I think the longer term issue is what changes the Senate makes, and then having to send back a different bill to the House, because remember, House and Senate have to pass identical versions, and asking the House to vote a second time on a new and potentially substantially changed bill. So we still have quite a fight ahead of us.
Scott, thanks so much for that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Sindhu. Appreciate being with you.
All right, and before we close today, a few notes for you. The Senate Finance Committee will hold a hearing tomorrow, Tuesday, on the nomination of former Representative Billy Long to serve as IRS Commissioner. And in case you missed Week in Review with Pam Olson, that is linked in the description of this episode, as well as episodes with Rohit Kumar and Pat Brown on the tax bill's post-markup path. And finally, while Monday Briefing will return on June 2nd, we will continue to bring you analysis on the tax bill as developments unfold. And thank you so much for spending this time with us. Take care.